I love my wife Jennifer with all my heart. We've been together since 2006, both of us in the 10th grade. Like anyone else that's been in a serious relationship, we've had our ups and downs. Nothing has ever seriously threatened our relationship, though. Not until recently, that is. Jen's been... well, she's been sleepwalking, as of late. I know that doesn't sound like a big deal. Hell, a good amount of people sleepwalk. When Jen sleepwalks, though, it's downright creepy. It's almost like she's possessed by something. I know it sounds like I'm being paranoid, but please, hear me out. I don't know exactly what day it was that she started the sleepwalking. It was definitely within the past week. The first night wasn't horrible, a little odd, but nothing, too scary. I woke up to the sound of cupboards opening and closing. Not like she got in, grabbed the cup, and then closed it, but just repeatedly opening and closing them. It's like a child slamming the bedroom door while throwing a fit. I looked over my wife's side of the bed and noticed it was empty. Sighed, got out of bed, wiping the sleep from my eyes. "Jen, what's going on?" I called out as I walked down the hallway. Once I entered the living room, I was able to see the kitchen, and that's when I had my first what the hell thought run through my head. She was standing stiff as a board, head staring straight down at the ground. Her right hand was reaching above her head with the cupboard handle gripping tightly, opening then closing the door over and over again. "Jen, what the hell are you doing?" I was baffled. Her sleepwalking hadn't crossed my mind yet. She didn't stop. She stood in the exact same position, in the exact same rhythm, slamming the door. And after staring at her with wide eyes for a few seconds, my brain finally woke up enough to realize she must have been sleepwalking. I'll admit my heart was racing pretty good. I mean, come on, it's in the middle of the night. Pitch black house other than the hall light behind me. And I walk out to my wife standing like a zombie, repeatedly opening and closing a cupboard door. It was kind of a creepy sight to wake up to out of a dead sleep. So I shook my head, I chuckled to myself a little, walked over to Jen, placed my hand on her shoulder, and gently guided her away from the kitchen. Thankfully, she didn't resist or anything. She mumbled a couple of incoherent words and allowed me to walk her back to bed. We went back to sleep, and that was that. For the first night, anyway. The next day, I told Jen about her little sleepwalking incident. Instead of laughing like I thought she would, her face tensed. She looked very uncomfortable. "It's no big deal, babe. At first it did scare the shit out of me, though," I laughed, trying to comfort her. She gave a small smile and nodded. I found it very odd that she seemed bothered by a small sleepwalking incident, but didn't press it any further. Maybe she had an embarrassing memory or something, and as a result she was embarrassed to sleepwalk. Either way, I figured if it happened again, I just wouldn't tell her about it. I mean, I honestly didn't think it would happen the next night as well. But she never sleepwalked in the 14 years I had been with her. I figured the chances of it happening were pretty low, so I went about my day not giving it another thought. Before I knew it was bedtime and Jen was fast asleep. I was asleep soon after. Sometime in the middle of the night, I was woken up again. This time it sounded like a door opening and closing. My heart raced, yet again as I rolled over to find Jen's side of the bed vacant. I rolled back out of bed and prepared to gently walk her back to bed. And this time I kind of knew what to expect, so I wasn't quite as alarmed. As soon as I opened the bedroom door, I saw Jen. This time, however, she was standing in front of the bathroom door, which was located just 5 feet from our bedroom, in the hall. Her head was craned at what looked like a very painful angle, and she was staring directly at me. Now, if you walk down the hall and make a right-hand turn, there's our bathroom. Her body was facing straight towards the bathroom, and her head was turned my way. Direct 90-degree angle. Her chin was literally on top of her right shoulder. Her eyes were open so wide it looked like she had snorted a line of coke or something. "Jen?" I called out nervously. As soon as I said her name, she froze, mid-door stroke and all. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, and then her lips curled into the biggest, widest grin I had ever seen in my 30 years of life. Goosebumps immediately covered my whole arm as my heart slammed in my chest. This didn't look like Jen at all. We sat staring at each other with neither of us moving a muscle. I was too afraid to move, in fear that she would come charging at me or something. And finally, after maybe a minute or so, her smile slowly faded, and she got back to opening and closing the door. I quietly stepped back into the bedroom and closed the door, making sure not to make a sound. I got back in bed, but I couldn't fall asleep. I just laid down listening to her opening and closing that door all damn night. Sometime right before daylight, I heard the door stop moving, followed by footsteps coming down the hall. My heart was beating 1,000 beats a minute as she approached. I rolled over and pretended I was asleep. She opened the door, walked up to the bed, slowly climbed back in. I lay as still as possible, so it seemed like I was asleep. After maybe 15 minutes, I heard her begin to snore, and that's when my heart finally slowed down to just a normal pace. The sound of our alarms blaring startled me, as I must have dozed off for a short while. The night's events fresh in my mind as I groggily got out of bed and got ready for work. Before I walked out the door, Jen woke up and gave me a kiss goodbye. I acted as if nothing had happened, not knowing how to approach the subject. I figured I'd maybe talk to her when I got home or something, but for now, I needed to just get out and be myself and get my thoughts together. Work dragged ass because I was dog-ass tired. I was halfway relieved, but halfway nervous as the workday came to an end. I calmed down a little by telling myself that tonight would be different. Tonight she wouldn't sleepwalk and everything would be okay. As I pulled into the driveway, another wave of nervousness washed over me. "This is your wife, damn it, just talk to her," I whispered to myself. A little pep talk. I forced myself out of my truck and I walked up the stairs to my front door. I opened the door and was greeted by Jen's horrible taste of hip-hop music. All my worry washed away as I heard her singing loudly from the shower. I chuckled as I set my lunch pail down and walked into my room to sit down and relax. As I sat there, I debated with myself if I should talk to Jen about her sleepwalking or just let it go. Well, tonight was different. After all, she didn't try to hurt me or anything. It just scared the living piss out of me. Eventually, I decided against talking to her, telling myself that if it happened again or got worse, I would talk to her then. Satisfied with my decision, I closed my eyes, and soon after fell asleep. I woke up hours later as it was dark outside. I jumped as a loud thump at my door startled me. I looked up and I nearly shit my pants. Jen was standing with her back to me, stiff as ever, opening and closing our bedroom door. Once again, my heart started racing wildly as I attempted to stay still as possible. Moving my head slowly, I looked over at the clock. 6:23 p.m. Why the hell is she doing this awake? I thought to myself as the door slammed in the background. Right next to the clock was a piece of paper that caught my attention as it wasn't there before. I slowly reached over and grabbed the paper, noticing writing on it. "Babe, I'm taking a quick nap. Dinner is in the fridge. Wake me when you wake up. Love you." Fuck, I thought to myself. I was too busy reading to notice how quiet the room had gotten. My heart started beating even faster as I slowly looked to where Jen was standing. I froze as I saw her. She was turning around slightly, her neck doing most of the turning, and she had those damn wild eyes and giant grin that she had the night before. We stared at each other again for what felt like an eternity before out of nowhere she turned and booked it down the hall, her steps thundering through the house as she raced into what sounded like the kitchen. I heard a drawer slam open and silverware being tossed around. Instinctively, I jumped out of bed and I ran straight for the bathroom, shutting and locking the door behind me. As soon as I turned the lock, I heard her footsteps booming back towards the hallway in the bedroom. She stopped just a few feet away as she reached the entrance to the bedroom. I quietly climbed into the bathtub and closed the curtain behind me, afraid that she would hear me. I almost jumped out of my skin as the footsteps started thundering through the house again. She ran through the house like that for over an hour before her booming footsteps finally stopped. I climbed out of the bathtub. I put my ear to the door and listened closely. I breathed a huge sigh of relief as I heard soft snoring coming from the living room. This was my chance. I opened the bathroom door as quietly as I could, tiptoeing through the living room, and I looked over at Jen sleeping on the couch. On the ground next to her was the biggest kitchen knife that we owned. I walked to the door, I put on my shoes, I grabbed the car keys as well. I slipped out the door and ran to my truck, starting it and peeling out as fast as I could. I decided to check into a hotel for the night and try and think of what to do next. So here I am, holed up in a cheap motel. Jen texted me like 10 times, called me even more. I'm ignoring her attempts to reach me. I feel horrible. This is my wife. And I'm afraid to death of her. She keeps begging me through text to come home, or at least to respond, and I'm on here to see if anyone has ever experienced anything like this before, and if so, did it stop? Please, any advice would be appreciated. I'll be sure to update if I get a handle on this or if it gets worse. If you don't hear from me, well then I guess it's safe to assume that she killed me. Wish me luck, everyone.
My phone buzzed. A text from Eric read, "Come on, please. My treat. Royal House is like the best restaurant in the city. 4 stars, or 5 stars. I mean, how many stars can a restaurant get? It has the max number of stars." I smiled, sadly. Then I sighed and typed, "I'd love to, but I can't." "Ma'am?" A moment later, Eric shot me an annoyed emoji, followed by, "We can ask for plastic cutlery when we're there." No, that's fucking embarrassing. They'll have like 1,000 reflective surfaces there, Eric. Plates, wine glasses, food trays. Thank you for understanding. We can go anywhere else, though? "Ma'am." I looked up. The handyman was standing in the hallway, waving me down. I followed him to my bathroom, but stopped at the threshold of the door when I saw the light was on inside. You want to join me in here?" "No, thank you." He furrowed his brow but didn't press me. Okay, well, here's the deal. Mirrors built into the wall. It ain't as simple as taking down a painting, Oh. And what'd you say was wrong with it exactly? Ain't like mirrors can stop working right unless they're broken. No, it's not. I mean, it works fine. I'm just trying to do some remodeling. He stared at me, eyebrow cocked, and blinked once. "Remodeling." "Mm-hmm. And that requires you to take down your bathroom mirror?" "Mm-hmm. Yep." Again, he sensed I didn't want to discuss it further and moved on. "Well, we can schedule an appointment and I can take it down for you, but ain't gonna be cheap, and I'd need written permission from the owner of the building." I gulped. Oh, shit. "But permission? No. I mean, he wouldn't. I mean, he might, but I pay rent here, and he said I could rearrange. This ain't rearranging, ma'am, or remodeling. This is restructuring. We'd have to do permanent work to the wall behind the glass. Once you take down something that size, you can't just put it right back up." I stared at the thing in defeat. "I'm sorry," he said. "I really am, but I don't see how we can get this done without going through the proper channels, I nodded. "Aight," he said. "Well, you got my number if the landlord says we can get started, okay?" I nodded again, holding back tears. He pushed his way past me. At the apartment door, he stopped, bag in hand, and looked over at the TV with a throw rug tossed over top. "Can I just ask what it is about mirrors that scares you so much? I mean, I don't mean to—" "Thanks for coming by," I said, shutting the door and cutting him off. I heard him mumble psycho under his breath and head off. I slumped against the door and fell back down, grabbing my hair in fistfuls. They always ask why. They always have to know. I never should have rented this fucking place. On the counter where I'd left it, my phone buzzed again. I got up and checked. 3 messages from Eric. "Oh, fine. Maybe we can do something outside? Then, would that work? Then, you there?" As I read through them, a 4th popped up. "Talk to me, Anna. I'm worried about you." I typed in, "Sorry, I was talking to the maintenance guy. I'm okay." "No, I'm not." To change the subject, I quickly followed up with, "A movie in the park is tonight. You want to do that?" He gave the message a thumbs up, and I gave the same to him in response. "Meet there at 7? Then I plopped on the couch with cereal, opened up my laptop, and typed in DIY remove bathroom mirror. There was a YouTube video matching that, so I clicked on it and leaned back with my breakfast. Then the screen went dark, and I saw the briefest possible reflection of myself. Fuck! I panicked, spilling my bowl onto my PJs as I slammed the screen down. Milk missed my laptop by like an inch and covered the couch cushions. I didn't even bother cleaning it up. Not yet. I breathed heavily, eyes closed. Hello. Miss me? No. Nope. No. You're fine. You didn't hear that. And you barely saw anything. I got my bearings, slowed my breathing, and searched for the cause of the dead computer. I found it quickly enough. The charger wasn't plugged in. I fixed that and forced myself to think of something, anything else, while I cleaned up the milk and cereal. You didn't see it. Baseball cards. You kind of did, though, didn't you? Baseball diamonds. Baseball bats. Oh, you definitely did. World Series. Who won last year? Yankees? Probably. Don't they always win? You saw your face, and it's fucking ugly. Yankees. Babe Ruth bars, candy bars. You bitch. Snickers. Milky Way? The Milky Way. Galaxies. Andromeda. You ugly fucking bitch. I never watched that show. Or Battlestar Galactica? You know you saw me. You know you saw that zit. I wonder if there are any good sci-fi shows. Probably, don't have the best budget. Star Trek, was a really big deal. Eric saw that zit and didn't say anything. He doesn't actually love you. Star Trek, Star Wars, Yoda. Speaking backwards? I always thought that was funny. Eric hates you. He mocks you. He fucks other women. Luke Skywalker, skies, big, beautiful skies. Probably Beth or Melissa. He always thought they were cuter than you. Because they are. He doesn't love you. Beautiful skies, ugly you. He's just using you to get to them. Before I even knew what was happening, I had my laptop back open. I couldn't resist. I looked at my reflection again. There was a zit. Huge, ugly, pulsating. Then the device booted back up, and the image was gone. I felt my face, but I couldn't feel anything there. No blemish, no zit. Oh, it's there, said the voice in my head. Your mind is lying to you, Anna. But I'm not. It's there. I stood at the threshold of the bathroom for a long time before I walked inside, and I stood in front of the mirror even longer before turning the lights on. But I could only look at my reflection for a split second once the room was lit. I gasped and buried my face in my hands. Look at me. No, I don't look like that. I can't. You do. I peeked back out from between my fingers. There it was. Left cheek. How had I not seen it before? How long had I been walking around like that? I felt my face. Something that big, that infected looking. It'd have to hurt, right? But I felt nothing. My face was smooth. Don't trust your mind. Trust me. I walked up to the mirror and leaned in. The thing was red. Bright red, like an insect bite, but worse. It was festering, moving. It was utterly disgusting. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed some lemon juice, applied it to a cotton swab, and held that to my face for some time while I tried and failed to distract myself with some trashy TV. But when I got back to the bathroom, I was horrified at the results. The zit looked bigger. Somehow. What? How? I squeezed the skin of my cheek. In the mirror, the blemish oozed with pus and slime. Oh, you diseased bitch. Look at you. You think Eric wants to see you like this? I stopped, looked up a bit. Oh, and what's that? A unibrow? Ugh, have you no pride in your appearance? I felt the space between my eyebrows. It felt smooth. But the image, it didn't lie. Maybe it had been a while since I'd plucked. See, I show you who you truly are. I blinked away tears and scrambled through my drawers, tossing floss and tampons and cotton swabs and bandages to the floor, but I couldn't find any tweezers. Oh, disorganized bitch. I screamed and ran back to my room, the place with no mirrors and the curtains always drawn closed, and fumbled around the drawers there. I did the same, tossed pens, notebooks, pills, my old diaries buried at the bottom in dust. Got 'em. I grabbed the tweezers and ran back into the bathroom. But I stopped, cold, again, before I even started plucking. Yes, your nose has always been that crooked. Bent. Hooked. Like a witch. I got in close, moved the tip up and down and around. Want to know why you never noticed? Because you're as stupid as you are ugly. And without me, you'd have never known. I felt something wet fall down my face and wiped it. Tears. I hadn't noticed them either. Pathetic. The TV was on, but I was too distracted by my phone to pay any attention. Rhinoplasty options, prices, local doctors, free consulting. Did I really want to get a nose job from a place that offers free consulting? Could I afford not to? On the TV, the swimsuit models pranced around behind some before and after shots of a woman who'd lost 73 pounds on a new diet supplement. Another man had lost 41 pounds and looked great. God, they're beautiful. Look at them. Chiseled, happy, perfect. I looked down. I didn't look fat, but come back to me. I'll show you who you are. I turned sideways in the bathroom, checked out my profile. It was a wonder my shirt didn't burst open, with how hard it was straining against my own belly. When did I get so fat? You cow, you fat fucking cow. I looked down. My shirt was baggy. My stomach was flat when I ran my hand down it. No. Don't go there. Don't you dare. This is how you got fat in the first place. You trick yourself into thinking you're not, and then you go for another drink, a second slice, another piece of candy from the bowl. Look at you. I did. The image was clear. I'd gained at least 40 or 50 pounds, maybe more. I teared up. You knew you shouldn't have had that ice cream last week. But you did it anyway, you fat bitch. I shut the lights off, stared at my obese silhouette in the dark, and sobbed silently. In the kitchen, I cut a single piece of celery into 4 parts and ate one. When I finished puking it up, I tossed the rest and glanced at the fridge. Empty it. I did. I grabbed trash bags from beneath the sink, opened the fridge, got on my knees, scoured around the shelves. I picked up a block of cheese and turned it over in my hand. Trash it. Shredded cheddar, that old Swiss, all of it. It's probably moldy anyway. I tossed it all into a bag, leaned back into the fridge. Milk? What do you need milk for? Coffee, cereal, things that make you fat. Into the bag it went. Apples? Oh, fruit's fattening, they say. Stick with veggies. Maybe not even that. I tossed my apples, the half-empty bag of grapes, the avocados. After a moment's hesitation, I tossed the carrots too. Trash. Like you. Creamer? Ditch it. Orange juice? Pathetic. Out. Leftover takeout? Wow, amazed you didn't eat it all at once. Gone. I tossed every fattening, disgusting thing in that fridge until it was empty. Cabinets. I threw them open, trash bag in hand. Spaghetti? Oh, wow. Do you enjoy buying new and bigger pants every month? Trash it. Eating makes you fat. Soup too. Out. I scrolled through old photos in bed. They're all perfect. Beth, Melissa, Addie, Becca. But not you. Look how ugly you look. Hooked nose, unibrow, yellow crooked teeth. That big fat gut. That's why you're off to the side. They didn't want you there at all, but they're too nice to say anything. I commented below one of the Facebook photos. Delete this, please? A moment later, Beth wrote back, What? Why? Are you okay? No, I'm not. Huh. She would have known that if she cared at all. I didn't respond to her comment or the message I got from her a moment later. Hey, you okay? We miss you. Liar. Why would anyone miss you? I know. I alone tell the truth. I know. I typed out and deleted 3 or 4 different responses before finally giving up. A moment later, my phone buzzed. I wiped my tears and checked it. Eric, of course. Wow, that sucks. I mean, I was really looking forward to seeing you tonight. Are you sure? I didn't even respond. I just rolled over and wept until I fell asleep. If they can't tell you the truth, are they really your friends? Be alone with me, here in the deep. The knife dug deeper. The wound bled freely, just like the other cuts and scrapes that covered my face and arms. You deserve the pain. Dig harder. I did, but in the mirror, the zit, now one of dozens, went nowhere. I ran my hand over my face. I still couldn't feel the pimple there, but I can feel those cuts, and see them too. Hideous. A patchwork of self-inflicted scars that wouldn't go away quickly. Worthless whore. You've made it worse. Have you ever done anything else? Foundation, concealer, lots and lots of that. Lipstick, mascara, eyeshadow, primer, powder. I bought most of it all last week. It was almost all gone now. Caked in overlapping layers on my face. I checked the mirror. It barely worked. That's it? Still visible. Fuck. Unibrow, too ugly to cover up, no matter how hard I tried or how frequently I plucked. And, I mean, I can't fix that nose with makeup, or my teeth, or my frizzled fucking hair, or how one eye is lower than the other, or how my cheeks are somehow too gaunt and too fat at the same time. I smeared the shit all over anyway, obsessively. It mixed together, formed layers, crusted over. More. It's never enough. Just like you. I tossed another empty pen on top of ripped out photos of myself that laid all over the bedroom floor. I uncapped another ballpoint and scribbled over a yearbook photo already smeared with the word ugly and an arrow pointing to my face. You've always been hideous. Unworthy. I tossed the photo. Not enough. Stomp on it. I did. Rip it. It represents you. It is you. Tear it. I did that too. Over and over until the biggest piece of it was hardly a centimeter wide. Screaming, teeth grit, crying with rage and vicious hatred, I kicked the pile of torn photos but smacked my toe against something solid and screamed. When I plopped back down on the bed, I picked it up. It was my old diary. I opened it, flipped through. Drawings, scribbled notes, written by me as a child and then as a teen. Shut that. Focus. In one drawing, a demonic beast stared back at normal little me from the other side of the mirror. Wait. Listen to me. Not that, you fat whore. I kept reading. Don't listen to the mirror monster, read one entry. No! It's not you, 14-year-old me had written on another page. It's something else. Something evil. Can I be evil if I speak the truth? It lies. No, the mirror doesn't lie. I don't lie. Your friends do. You do. To yourself. You're reading lies right now. The imposter distorts your reflection. It isn't you. Does it? Do I? Come to me again, Anna. See what you are through my eyes. Or are you afraid? Shut up. What did you say to me? Shut up. I beat you once. You didn't beat me. I flipped to another page in the diary. No mirrors, no monsters, I'd written over and over. No mirrors, no monster. No mirrors, no monster. I'd broken or covered every mirror. Avoided them ever since. See? You ran from the truth. You ran from me, coward. You can't confront it, because I'm right about you. You know I am. Stop it. You are mine. Mine. Stop it! I screamed aloud. In my head, something cackled. No mirrors, no monster, no mirrors, no monster, no mirrors, no monster. With resolve, I went into the living room and hurled my laptop into the TV. Both shattered. The TV fell over and slipped behind its stand with a crunch. Missed me. I grabbed a screwdriver from the drawer and undid the brass doorknob. In it, my demonic reflection, the imposter, mocked me, sticking out its tongue, pulling at its face. It wasn't my reflection at all. I wasn't doing those things. I saw it mouth the word harlot and heard the same in my head. When they were loose enough, the knobs clattered to the floor and the door creaked open. I stood up, grabbed a book, went to the bathroom, and hit the lights. In the mirror, the imposter mocked me, did things I wasn't doing. It pretended to smear makeup on its face, like I had done. I felt a powerful urge to do the same, but I resisted. And then it pretended to gouge zits, to purge food. Suddenly, I wanted more than anything to do both. But I didn't. I lifted the book. It stopped trying to puppet me and instead stared me down, the embodiment of all of my insecurities. Its eyes were wild and wicked and full of hate. What are you? Do it, it mouthed. As usual, I heard it in my head. All at once, I realized it sounded nothing at all like me, like my own thoughts. Show your mettle. I screamed and hurled the book into the glass. Slam! It chipped. I picked the book up and did it again. Crack! The chip spidered. The imposter grinned. In the broken glass, it looked even more distorted, more evil. Suddenly, it threw itself forward and pounded its fist on the other side of the glass, mocking my attempts to break it. I stumbled back, startled, and then it barked at me like a dog, over and over. I was paralyzed with fear. I shut my eyes. No mirrors, no monsters, no mirrors, no monsters, no mirrors, no monster. I hurled the book again and again. Smash, crack, slam. Mirror splintered, cracked, and then shattered into a million shards. The reflection was gone. Am I? It cackled again. I collapsed, weeping. All my resolve, my determination, and you are mine. Didn't mine have it. Stop it, please. No, I broke you. I broke you. I cried. I had no answer. I was so weak, so tired. Outside, the door creaked open. Hello? It was Eric. I perked up and opened my mouth to speak, to call out, but I couldn't. I looked down at a broken shard of glass. The imposter had covered its mouth. I couldn't scream. I heard Eric stop short. He must have seen the TV smashed and the bags of food still by the fridge. Oh my God, he said. Anna? Anna! He began running around the place looking for me. Anna! Look at me, said the imposter. You want him to see you like this? I picked up the shard of glass. The imposter stared back, a vicious, mutated mockery of my image. It raised its wrist and pretended to slash it. Suddenly, I felt cold and dead inside, utterly without hope. Do it, it mouthed. Pay for your worthlessness in blood. It mimed another slash, right across the wrist. I wanted to obey. Anna! I heard Eric barge into my room. Where are you? I didn't even notice it, but I'd already extended my other wrist. How did you... Remember to whom it is you belong. Obey! Obey! I raised the shard to my wrist, pressed the tip of the glass into my skin until it drew blood. I deserve this. Do it. End it. End me. Silence it all. I shut my eyes. It was all I wanted. Anna? I opened them, looked up. Eric was standing in the bathroom door, and suddenly I wanted to end it all, just a little bit less. Oh my God, he said. Your mom told me to check in on you. Oh my God. Oh my God. He didn't even ask about the mess or the shards at my wrist or my cuts and scrapes and bruises. He just got down and hugged me and kissed my forehead. I dropped the glass. No! Focus! I thought you were dead, said Eric. He sounded genuinely relieved. For some reason, that surprised me. He leaned back, looked at the mess, looked at me. Hey, let's get you cleaned up, okay? Come on. I didn't want to move. I just hugged him and cried. Hey, he said. It's okay. You're okay. Come here. He started crying too. Just a bit. Stop this. No. Obey me. I choose not to. You unworthy bitch. Slut. His love is false. No. You are. Don't you defy me. You hear me? Whore, harlot, worthless. Enough. Enough. Eric squeezed me tighter. I did the same back. I heard a whisper in my head, and then silence. My phone buzzed. It was Eric. I picked it up. Hey, you ready? Yeah, sorry. Just doing makeup. I'll be right out. Okay, I'm outside. Gotta get Becca in like 15. I know, I'm coming. Love you. Love you too. I hung up and resumed applying my makeup, normal amounts of it, in the fixed bathroom mirror on the wall. Look at me. I'm busy. I have to do my makeup. Look at me. I'm you. Nah, you're not. In the mirror, the imposter spat at me, stuck out its tongue, pulled at its face, mimed suicide. Utterly desperate and just as powerless. Because that's how I wanted it. I capped the lipstick. Damn, I look good, I said out loud. Then I hit the lights and left the bathroom, past the new TV and the fridge stocked with leftovers. And I ran outside into the sun.
I can't name the specific clinic, but I work at a cutting-edge research facility that studies sleep disorders. Alongside our research, we also offer limited treatments where we try to identify or help people with sleep difficulties who've been able to get help elsewhere. One of the young people I work with is a boy I'm going to call Brian, obviously not his real name. He's around 12 years old and first came to us around a year ago when this appeared to be an unusual sleep disorder. Brian had spent most of his life diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder and antisocial personality disorder. For those of you who don't know those terms, that means Brian is prone to violent and often hurtful behavior. Often characterized by extreme resistance to discipline, personally I think he's quite sweet. Brian has also stabbed 3 different children, 2 teachers, and was once caught testing a bear trap on local cats. Brian also has a remarkable intellect, but he's utterly disinterested in personal interactions of any kind. Amongst other things, he is fixated on the collection of weapons and traps. Left to his own devices, he's been known to steal everything from knives to the ingredients of gunpowder, and regularly demands survival manuals from local libraries and other special items that he's deemed significant. Once, he ran away and traveled over 100 miles to obtain a wildlife trap kept in a museum, apparently enamored with its unique hinge mechanism. Anyone who gets in the way of his collecting is at serious risk of being attacked, and because Brian is both intelligent and very patient, these attacks can be quite horrific. Just ask the teacher who found a sewing needle in her ham sandwich a month after she confiscated his pocket knife. It took years of therapy before Brian's parents discovered that he was collecting these things to help him survive the night. And since that time, they observed him sleeping. He appeared normal enough, but Brian was adamant that he had to keep these various devices in his room and have them near as he fell asleep. His parents eventually gave in and let him take these strange objects to bed. When morning came, the strange things would be gone, presumably hidden away, somewhere no adult knew of. At their wits' end, and terrified that their son would never move past these strange fixations on dreams and weapons, Brian's parents finally brought him to me. Now, I'm a development psychologist, specializing in sleep and dream disorders. Qualifying in both CBT and neuroscience, I was tasked with working with Brian in the hopes of understanding exactly why he's so different to other children. My conclusions are, frankly, insane. You see, it began with tests on Brian as he slept. Obviously, we had to allow him to take weapons with him into the sleep room. It was a hard sell to the ethics committee, but I was determined to get an EEG reading of Brian's brain as he slept. I knew the only way that he'd agree is if we had, let him have something to help him feel safe. And since then, he slept nearly every night of the last year in that room with me. Thing is, Brian isn't sleeping. See, he looks like he's sleeping, but he's not. I know a sleeping brain. He is absolutely not sleeping. He's conscious. He lies with his eyes closed, but his brain does not enter even the slightest stage of sleep. He awakes refreshed. He shows no sign of sleep deprivation. But neurologically speaking, Brian's brain never even comes close to sleep. See, in my experience, his activity most closely resembles that of PTSD, patients asked to recount their traumatic experiences. Others from the clinic have said that Brian's brain shows shocking similarities to the brains of veteran soldiers, both in structure and activity. I racked my brain over this problem for 3 months. I tried every machine in the building, and in the end, I concluded that the results were accurate. That means that, providing the data was correct, Brian is the only human alive who doesn't actually sleep. Now, I've since been advised not to publish these results specifically, and I understand why. No one would believe me. Since then, I've augmented the neurological approach with a psychological one, which I suppose is a fancy way of saying that I've spoken to Brian extensively. Normally I give out lollipops during my sessions, but I found Brian oddly appreciative of UHC milk and charcoal briquettes. It took a long 5 weeks, but Brian finally opened up to me and he revealed a most peculiar story. He says that every night when he goes to sleep, he dreams. He says these dreams occur the instant he closes his eyes and end the instant he opens them, come sunrise. But for every second he lies down, he spends a corresponding second immersed in his dream. He says that his dreams follow the rules of reality, except he describes them as 100% lucid, none of the plastic reality associated with normal dreaming. When I described my own dreams to him, Brian thought it hilarious and utterly bizarre. To him, there's one dream, and it's continuous. It's all just one long nightly experience, stretching back to his earliest memory, as he put it. If anywhere is the dream, it's here. See, there's flying metal birds here, and pictures that flash stupid messages, and people who don't care about being alive. But over there, there's only life and death. I think that makes a lot more sense than any of this. Brian went on to tell me that he can take things into his dream. Anything he holds in his hands goes across with him. Worryingly, this is consistent with my own observations. Whatever he takes into the room isn't there when he wakes up. His parents told me that they thought he found a way of getting rid of the items during the night, but our sleeping rooms are secured, above ground, no windows. I don't know where he could put a half-gallon of kerosene or 30 meters of rope. But sure enough, whatever he takes in with him isn't there come morning. He simply puts these things under the covers and poof. The sheets fall flat down and they disappear right before the camera, like a magic trick. I'm still not used to seeing it, but it happens, quite sure of it. On a hunch, I took Brian to an archery lesson and watched him hit every bullseye for 2 hours straight. Another time I watched as he patiently sat me down and stitched up a wound that I received moving a broken bed frame. He fixed furniture around the clinic, killed passing birds with a homemade sling, and once made a knife out of flint that he collected on a trip to the beach. His knowledge is extensive, his skills completely beyond what any normal child should have. When I asked why this is, he tells me that when he lies down, he goes to a place without adults. He describes it as rich with life but dangerous. The animals, he says, are like our animals but different. There's him and nature, and he fights for his survival tooth and nail. During one of our longest conversations, I asked if he ever saw other people in this world, to which he answered, early on, yes, but they weren't good enough. Brian then gave me 6 names. I won't repeat them here, but they sounded real. And when I searched for them, I managed to find scattered articles that mentioned just 2 children, aged 6 and 7, with the same names. They had apparently died in their sleep, when Brian would have been only 5. I took the photos to him and he immediately nodded his head. She fell over and was taken first, he said, while pointing to a young girl with a pink bow in her hair. She survived longer, he added, while pointing to the next girl, but not by much. These children had died a month apart, and thousands of miles away from each other. It didn't make any sense, but Brian was convinced that he knew them. Even stranger, the following day he came in and gave me a pink lace. I went back to the clearing where she fell, and found it, he said, nodding to the muddied lace in his hand. It belonged to her. It was hard back then, but some older kids helped us before I took them. It was ragged and knotted, no longer a bow, but holding it in my hand I saw that it was an eerie match to the pink bow in the picture of that young girl. Confused and concerned, I asked, what took them? Mr. Tatler, he said. Mr. Tatler? I repeated. One of the other young ones named it, I think, he said with a strange matter-of-factness. We grouped together at first, and one of the other boys said it reminded him of a monster from a book his father read. The monster in the book was called Mr. Tatler. Ever since then, that was what it was named. And Mr. Tatler tries to hurt you? Mr. Tatler's always haunted us, he said. Nothing else is like it. And what does Mr. Tatler look like? I asked. Brian pursed his lips, looked thoughtful for a moment. Like an insect's idea of a god, he said, before carrying on reading his book on architecture. And it just roams this world? I asked, haunting you? Yes, he answered. I can't stay still too long. It never stops. It never rests. You could trick it and trap it, but it never stays still for long. So that means I can't stay still for long either. I have places to keep things, but I can't stay there. I have to make sure my things are spread out. It knows to wait for me sometimes, hiding in the places that I built for myself. So I have to be ready to go somewhere new, and I have to make sure that I keep lots of spare things in different places. Because it's smart. Smarter than people, I reckon, he answered. What is this world like? There are savannas if you follow the sunset. Weird mushroom forests if you follow the sunrise. And depending on the time of year, it can get cold or warm. But I mainly stay in the jungle because of the cover. If you're curious, he said, the first girl to die tried to run into the water and was eaten by one of the things that live in there. So there are more things hunting you than just Mr. Tatler. No, he said. The animals are dangerous, but stupid. Only Mr. Tatler hunts us. I mean, other animals try, but they're just animals. It was a scorpion, by the way. A scorpion? I asked. Yeah, he said. What took that girl? It's about 4 meters long. They don't have stingers, but they do look like scorpions. They're very tasty if you cook them right. Not very smart either. It's dangerous, but I think it's fun to kill dangerous things. It makes me feel strong. Have you tried to kill Mr. Tatler, then? Oh, no, Brian said, his face scrunched into a frown. You don't want to get near Mr. Tatler. He's fast and far too large. Even though he's big, he can hide very well, changing size and shape to fit into strange places, and he's too fast to run away from. If you stay still and hide, or find a way to distract him, he might not see you. That's how I survived when I was too young to know any better. but the best way to beat Mr. Tatler is to know where he is, and to stay very, very far away from him. I don't know why, but I found him convincing. He was so driven. He spoke with such purpose. I couldn't imagine a child making all that up. I told myself I didn't believe him, that it was just a strange disorder. But I decided the best I could do for Brian was to just give him the resources he needed to feel safe. That meant getting him books, weapons, fuel, any random thing he asked for. He'd often wake up in the clinic, stumble straight off to my office, and start reeling off a list of specific things. In return for me getting these things, Brian agreed to stop attacking people. It was deemed a sort of breakthrough by his parents, but I felt like a fraud. People acted like I was an incredible therapist, but all I'd done was buy a child crossbows, knives, water filtration kits. If anyone had realized, I would have been humiliated because deep down, I felt like I secretly believed some element in the story. But it worked. And over the last month, Brian and I developed a close bond. He has a farmer's attitude to animals, and a retired man's love of history. Strangely, he reminds me of my father, who once broke a rabbit's neck after I brought it to him with a broken leg. In the hope of giving Brian some kind of education, I began taking him out on various field trips. One of the most insightful of these trips involved the Natural History Museum. Brian particularly enjoyed learning about how people survived pre-agriculture, but it was actually as we passed a display from the Devonian period that he stopped to stare at some artwork showing a muddy brown amphibian. It was meant to be one of the first invertebrates to migrate into land, some hundreds of millions of years ago. He grunted. What's wrong? I asked. The color is wrong, he said, gesturing to the strange-looking salamander. They change depending on the season, but they never look like that. Then he took a sweeping look around the various things in the room. Who would have thought? He muttered to himself. He later made me buy a book from the gift shop that showed all the things in the particular display. And then that night, before falling asleep, he came to me and carefully pointed out a fossilized plant that he'd circled with a red pen. I didn't have a clue what he was trying to communicate until he came into my office the following morning. He walked up to me and placed something cold and soft in my open palm. When I looked down, I saw a perfect living replica of the flower from the book. Could you take a camera with you? I asked, barely able to even grasp the staggering conclusion I was slowly reaching. What would I use that for? He said, perplexed by my request. I don't need a camera, I need more rope. And with that implicit request, he returned to his room and gathered his things, and left me alone with my shattered mind. Obviously, I obliged, but for the next few weeks, I started to slowly come to terms with the strange possibility that Brian's story was legitimate. I secretly tasked a few close friends of mine to perform analysis on some items I asked Brian to bring back with him. 2 of them had since stopped speaking to me, believing me a fraud, and the third told me it was a miraculous prank. A 4th reported me for ethics violations, saying that I had clearly taken some illegal cloning research. They wouldn't elaborate on their methods, but they claimed that the plant material I gave them was clearly a genetic facsimile of a prehistoric fern. I don't know how they'd known that for certain, but I might not be the only one with special projects. Shortly after this, Brian's parents went missing and he was brought into my custody. I didn't even suspect anything at first, but Brian made a few comments during one session. But that was about it. Are you real? He asked me. Yes, I replied. I thought so, he said with a nod. My parents were real too. I still don't know why it didn't occur to me to be alarmed. I knew deep down that I'd never make true progress with Brian. What I'd done was appease a young man with all the hallmarks of psychopathy. Even as he made utterly bizarre and out-of-character signs of affection to one of the research assistants, randomly taking her hand, telling her how much he missed his parents. I never once suspected that he was being deliberately manipulative of all of us. It happened at 3 a.m. I'm not allowed in the clinic right now. No one is. but I wouldn't go in there if someone put a damn gun against my head. I was asleep on the cot in my office when I suddenly awoke by a damp explosion. After I dressed, I stumbled out in the corridor with growing alarm. Just down the hall is Brian's room with a large one-way mirror where he'd normally be sound asleep. But when I fumbled my way into the corridor, still eyes groggy, all I saw in that room was darkness with the outline of a young child's back pressed against the glass. I ran to the door and I threw it open, crying out as ankle-high floods of blood and gore poured out from the room. I pushed it open anyway and slew inside, where it was completely black. The air was damp and hot, smelled of copper and meat. I couldn't see anything inside, not even my own hands. Turning around to face the door, I saw Brian, his silhouette backlit by faint lights that passed through the one-way mirror. His eyes were wide with terror, and I couldn't hear him as he hyperventilated. What I saw momentarily, reflected in the mirror, it was unspeakable. I still can't rightly explain it. Even now, I couldn't do it. I think Brian did the best job, like an insect's god. Somehow you knew that straight away. Its beady black eyes and rigid carapace spoke of a strange and ancient intellect. My body, on some evolutionary instinct, acted without thought. It was like I was physically repelled by the sight of that thing lunging from the darkness. I reached out and grabbed Brian, shaking him from his strange trance. In less than a fraction of a second, his eyes fixed on me, and we both ran out of that room so fast, he practically dragged me half the way. He thundered down the stairs, and I went after him, and we both burst out of the building where he collapsed onto the pavement. After a few seconds of him catching his breath, Brian finally told me, "I said it was good at hiding." I was in shock. How? I stuttered. "It never made sense to me," he said. "It's over there with no one to hunt. But what if it came here? Lots of people to hunt here. It just needed a way to come through. That's why it wanted us kids so bad. We could take things back and forth." "What is it?" I asked. "It's Mr. Tatler," Brian said, looking at me like I was stupid. "I knew I couldn't keep going forever. I could hide well, but not for the rest of my life, and once all the other kids were gone, I had no more distractions. I tried taking my parents across, but they didn't last long either. What I really, really needed was to bring it here, and have someone to distract it on this side." I looked horrified at Brian. "The assistant." "Poof," he said, and mimicked an explosion. "I asked her to sit in with me. I'm surprised you didn't notice. It got her good. I think that's why it left me. I think after all these years, we finally reached a compromise. That makes so much more sense. I can be over there alone, and he can be over here with people." Brian then looked at me with what I can only describe as the look of a mercy killer. "It's good you got away. I didn't think you'd be so quick, but you won't be quick enough for long. That's always the problem. It enjoys the long hunts. Because you got me out of there, I suppose I can give you some help." "I'd see out of dark places," he said with a grim smile. "It's very good at hiding." I spent all day being questioned by the police. And others. It's all gone so fast I can't even process it all. Now that they've left me alone, I've spent every second of the last 2 hours researching this thing. I find references, some old ones that maybe make some sense. I don't know. I just know that I'm not alone in my house. And it's getting dark here when I look outside. Jesus. It is good at hiding. I want to share this story because someone might find it useful. But I share this information urging you to be extremely careful, and begging you never to use it unless you find that you must. During my freshman year of college, I lost control, mostly due to freedom from my parents and a group of friends who were more interested in a good party than a good grade. I spent more time sleeping and drinking than I did in class or studying, but all that changed when I woke up in the hospital, bruised and covered in cuts. I was told that I'd been in a car accident the night before. I and 2 others were driving home from a party when the car crossed into the center divider, rolling several times and tossing all of us from the car. Miraculously, I escaped the crash with some scrapes and bruises, but mostly unharmed. The other guy in the car, Michael, broke his arm, got a bad concussion. However, the third occupant, a girl named Sam, was tossed from the rolling car and crushed underneath it. It took a rescue crew 4 hours to extricate her from underneath the crumpled mess of the metal. By the time they got to her, she was beyond saving. Police had no idea who was driving during the crash, and I couldn't remember anything about that night due to my state of impairment. Michael and I got stiff warnings about driving while intoxicated or getting into a car with a drunk person, but other than that, we got off scot-free. My friends all said that Sam had been driving, that I was so fucked up I couldn't even walk, let alone drive a car. Despite their reassurances, I was haunted by guilt and uncertainty. Had I been driving when we wrecked? Why did I survive? Was I responsible for her death? Every night I had nightmares of Sam calling from me, from underneath her twisted metallic grave. I stopped leaving my dorm, stopped answering my phone, consumed by guilt and uncertainty. After a month of moping around my dorm, a friend of mine named Mark reached out. We talked for hours about my uncertainty and how I would never get answers. In response, he told me about the legend of the Skinwalker house. A ramshackle green shack right off Highway 380. And here a person could meet with the ancient beings and make deals and bargains, including asking questions that otherwise could not be answered. At first, I was incredulous. I thought Mark was fucking with me, trying to play a sick prank. But I was desperate to know. So I talked with some friends who had grown up in a nearby reservation. One of them put me in touch with a tribal elder named Richard. And after a few emails and lying about doing a research project, Richard told me about summoning a skinwalker. When we first spoke, Richard was hesitant to talk about the subject. But after repeated calls and face-to-face meetings, Richard explained the ritual to summon the skinwalker. And as we finished our conversation, Richard warned me that when one makes a bargain with a witch always takes something in return. I'll give you the same warning that Richard gave me. The skinwalker is not to be summoned or questioned on a whim. So please, do not summon a skinwalker unless you're ready to accept the consequences of your actions. If you decide to disregard my warning, you'll need the pelt of a coyote, 4 animal fat candles, a rosary that has been blessed by a priest, a liter of animal blood, and a crow's feather. Skinwalkers are most active right after sundown, when there's a storm coming in from the southeast. The house where you can meet them is between mile marker 13 and 14. It's not hard to find. It took 3 months to find everything and for the perfect weather system to arrive. Mark and I drove together to the house around 5, just as the sun began to sink beneath the Magdalenas. Shadows oozed from the dilapidated house, its putrid green paint peeling off the bleached bone of wood. The house had no windows or doors remaining, and I could smell the mildew and rot from the road. Mark and I climbed through the barbed wire fence in front of the house and made our way in as the storm clouds rolled in, bringing with them peals of angry thunder. As we stepped inside, the smell of old, rotting wood overwhelmed me. I fought the urge to vomit as we sat down on the stripped wooden floor. We spread out the coyote pelt with the head facing me, placing the greasy wax candles at the end of its paws. We then placed the crow's feather in the mouth of the coyote pelt. After setting up the pelt and lighting the candles, Mark left the house and parked the car at a turnoff a mile up the road. When I was sure he was gone, I took the rosary out of my hands, pulled hard, scattering the beads across the floor and pelt. I sat down at the head and took the goat's blood that I had procured from a butcher, and I dumped it across the pelt, spattering myself on the ground in the dark maroon spatters. The storm continued its steady progression across the desert, and the roar of thunder rumbled in my chest. I closed my eyes and focused on the sound of the storm, willing the creature towards me. I was lost deep in my focus when I heard it. A wolf's howl mixed with the scream of a woman. a horrible cacophony of animal and man swirling together. I opened my eyes to see the house wreathed in fog. Supernatural mist surrounding the house, but not permeating the structure itself. I heard a deep guttural chant coming from beneath me as the creature approached the dilapidated wooden structure. And then came the footsteps. Heavy, padding steps, crunching against the gravel beneath me, quickly followed by the creak of wood as it stepped into the house. Its hot breath stung at the back of my neck as it sniffed me before circling in front of me. It had taken the form of a heavy gray wolf, far greater than even myself. The legs were too long and spindly, the hide patchy and balding, and its ears were short and tattered. The skinwalker sat across the pelt from me, staring at me like I was a rabbit about to be devoured. Its eyes were unlike those of a wolf's, with dark brown iris, angry white sclera, and round pupils. Suddenly the wolf let out a pained yelp and began to shudder. The braying whimpers of the animal filled the house as the fur and skin began to slough off the creature. The flesh sizzled and popped like frying meat as the body began to disintegrate, quickly followed by the opening of the cavity chest as a woman crawled out of the quickly decomposing wolf carcass. She had Native American features with skin so wrinkled and scarred I couldn't even guess her age. Hair hung in black, stringy strands, and worst of all, her lips were stretched and mangled so that her mouth could never close. She wore a patchwork of skins and pelts and a pair of antlers atop her head. Even sitting, she was nearly a head taller than me. She locked eyes with me, inhuman, horizontal slits like a goat's, peering out from beneath the mess of hair that hung around her face. Her voice croaked in her throat, and a harsh, guttural dialect spewed forth from her lips. My heart sank. How could I have been so stupid? Why would an ancient Navajo witch speak English? She must have noticed my disappointment because she reached for a pouch on her belt and took out some sort of gray, waxy substance. She spread it on the tips of her index finger, leaned forward and jammed her fingers into my ears, her long, dirty fingernails scratching my ear canal. I yelled in pain and surprise, and she shifted her weight back into a sitting position. For a split second, my hearing faded before the sound of the storm surged back to life with a loud crack. The old woman locked her eyes with me again, her face lit by the flickering candlelight. She spoke again, this time in English. I have given you the gift of hearing. What is it you seek from I who goes on all fours? Her voice, low and raspy, like sandpaper on stone. My voice caught in my throat, my gut tightening at her words, and I began to drift into a daze. I pulled my fingers into the flesh of my palm until I could focus again, and when I did answer, my voice was weak and uncertain. I need to know if I killed her. She cackled, her voice spiraling into a crescendo until she sounded like a coyote baying at frightened rabbits. Very well. I can help you. And what have you brought for me? My stomach twisted painfully again as fear crawled at the back of my mind. I haven't brought anything to give you. Very well. You have nothing to give, then I must take. Do you agree to these terms? I paused for a moment, considering what Richard had told me. But my guilt overwhelmed my rationale, and I shakily nodded my head in agreement to her terms. The skinwalker smiled at this, revealing rows of miscellaneous teeth in her cavernous, distorted mouth. The teeth were inhuman, with sharp, wolf-like canines mixed in with broad, flat teeth like a horse. In a horrible conglomeration of stained rows of ivory shards, the laughter came again from her lips, horrible coyote cackling that made my skin crawl. After another round of laughter, she produced a crude stone knife from her belt. With a quick motion, ran it across the palm of her hand, spilling dark rivets of blood onto the pelt, before reaching towards me. I extended my hand and she dug the cruel stone into the soft flesh of my palm. My skin cried out in agony and blood swept from the exposed flesh underneath. She clasped my bleeding hand with inhuman strength and pressed my wound against her own. Our blood mixed, and I felt it trickle down my arm and pool at the crook of my elbow. The woman began to chant and stared into my eyes as blood continued to flow freely down our arms onto the pelt beneath us. Her voice grew rough and animalistic as she continued her chanting. As suddenly as she had started, she stopped and let go of my now throbbing hand. How foolish you have been. Just like your forefathers. With their drink and their endless cruelty. But her blood is on her own hands. Her foolish pride gave way to steel and glass. I have given you your answer, and now I will take two things from you. I take from you your dreams. A wave of relief washed over me. I could live without dreams anymore. My dreams had been plagued with visions of Sam calling out for help beneath her metallic tomb, begging for my help. With inhuman strength and speed, the skinwalker grabbed my hand again and brought it to its mouth. I pulled hard against its grip and yelled to no avail as it pushed my thumb into its mouth. Hard teeth clamped down hard against the appendage, tearing away the flesh and bone of my thumb. Blood sprayed from my wound, painting a sanguine picture on its face. The creature chewed, and I could hear the crack of bone and the squelch of soft flesh in its teeth. I screamed in agony. I clutched my hand and pressed the wound to my chest. My vision faded and blurred as I slumped to the floor. I wish I had gone unconscious. I wish I had closed my eyes. Instead, I watched as the skinwalker tore the flesh off its face, its long claw-like fingers shredding through skin and muscle. The skinwalker grabbed the skin on its arm and pulled, tearing it away from the muscle underneath, the flesh coming away like wet newspaper. I watched the muscle of its arm bulge and flex as it tore away the soft skin of its stomach, disemboweling itself, a gray coil of intestines lolled out of the abdomen. Dragging against the rough wooden floor, it continued, tearing away its flesh until only scraps remained on the skeletal frame, and I watched. I willed my eyes to close, but they would not. I stared transfixed on the horrifying visage in front of me. The figure dropped to all fours and pulled one of its pelts that it was wearing over its face. The pelt stretched and contorted, spreading over the skeletal limbs. The figure trembled and shook, twitching unnaturally. Then it began to grow. The limbs stretching and contorting, the chest becoming narrower. I watched as two sets of large antlers splintered out of the top of its head, stopping just before the ceiling. The figure continued to shift and contort until finally a massive bull elk stood in front of me. It strode out of the house, then paused, and looked down at me. We locked eyes for just a moment before it let out a large bulge and then took off into the night. I pulled off my shirt and wrapped it tightly around my still bleeding hand. I staggered out of the house and glanced around, afraid the creature was waiting for me outside. There was nothing except for the rumble of thunder and the throbbing in my hand. I walked a mile to where Mark had parked the car, all the time pleading with my body to not bleed out. Mark paled when he saw me and rushed me to the hospital. I told the staff of the hospital I had been messing with old farm equipment. Story that bought easily enough. In spite of everything that happened, I felt relieved with the knowledge that I still hadn't killed Sam. The skinwalker kept its word. It did take my dreams, because now I dream not about Sam, but instead about the skinwalker. I dream of the skinwalker changing and shifting. I watch time and time again as it tears apart animals for its dinner. The worst is when it attacks people, as I'm forced to watch, as it stalks hikers and campers. I watch as it disembowels them, mounts their bodies onto tree limbs, or skins them alive. I don't go into the woods anymore, for fear that I might see that thing again. But now and then, as I drift off to sleep, I hear the sound of an elk bugle, followed by peals of coyote cackling. You'll change your mind when you grow up. Everyone always told me that whenever I said I didn't want to have kids. You usually hear that kind of thing from your own parents, right? Not me. My folks never once told me anything about having children of my own, or changing my mind. On the rare occasion when the topic was brought up and I'd voice my contempt towards little brats running around the house, taking up my free time, they'd go unusually quiet. I honestly didn't think I ever changed my mind. I expected my parents to start bothering me about it when I became an adult, but my mid-20s had gone by. Then my late 20s. Then the early 30s. I never really gave it much thought and just figured that I had extremely supportive parents. It was until I got married around the age of 34 and decided to break the news to my parents about my wife Julia being pregnant. Is she okay? My mother's smile contorted and she hastily covered her mouth with her hands, while my father simply stared blankly with an expressionless face. My mother ran out of the room as if she was about to vomit. Is she okay? I asked my dad, obviously baffled by their reaction at such big news. Yeah, she'll be fine. Congrats about the baby. I mean, that's great news. He forced a smile. As he reached for his glass of juice on the table, he accidentally knocked it over his hand, visibly trembling. Oh, no, I've gone and done it. Your mom's gonna kill me, he chuckled awkwardly. I'll go get something to clean this up. He stood up and practically ran out of the room, leaving Julia and I in utter silence. What was that about? She asked me. I could tell by her face that she felt horrible, especially since she was really good with my mom and this sort of reaction was unexpected from her. Oh, this is big news for them, you know. I thought they'd be happy. They would! I mean, they are. I mean, look, I'll go check up on them, alright? I went upstairs and called out to my parents, but they didn't respond. It wasn't until I was almost at the top of the stairs that I heard two voices, one distinctly sobbing and the other saying something in a hushed tone. As I got closer to the bathroom, it became clear that my mom was crying, while my dad was trying to soothe her quietly, shushing her along the way. Mom? I asked, as I peeked inside the bathroom. My mom sat on the toilet seat, her face buried in her hands, her body spasming up and down from crying. My dad was on his knees, gently stroking her shoulder. When he heard me, he jerked his head towards me and leaned on the bathtub, standing up with some difficulty. Dad, what's going on? I asked. I'd never seen my mom like this. Did she hate the notion of Julia bearing my children this much? Kevin, I think you better go now. Your mom's not feeling well, my dad said, as he stepped forward, forcefully making the exit to the bathroom. He closed the door behind him, muffling my mother's cries. Dad, what's wrong with Mom? Is she okay? Yeah, she's fine. She's just a little shocked, but she's happy for you two. It doesn't look like it. Trust me, she is. Go home. I'll call you later. Before I could say anything else, he went back inside the bathroom and shut the door in my face. Dumbfounded, I knew there was no point in pushing the situation any further, so I told Julia that my mother was feeling sick. She didn't buy it, of course, and got angry, saying that my mom could have reacted differently. She was right, and I myself was angry at my parents for the outburst. But at the same time, I hoped that they wouldn't make me pick sides. We drove home, and it wasn't until a few hours later that my dad sent me a text. We need to talk. Stop by around 3 p.m. tomorrow. Alone. Well, this can't be good, I said to myself, but decided to humor him. I had already made my decision about the approach I planned on taking with him. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This was my wife, goddammit. I wouldn't let him insult her like that, no matter what the reason was. The next day I went back to my parents' place and my dad opened the door. He smiled when he saw me, looking a lot less distressed than yesterday. Come on, Kev, he gestured, and I got in without a word. Is Mom here? I asked, as I hung my jacket on the coat hanger. No, I chose a time when she wasn't home so that we could have some privacy, he said as we sat in the living room. He sat on a sofa, the same one he'd been using for the past 20 years, and I stared at him across the room from the couch, the only thing separating us between the coffee table. So, he pursed his lips, tapping nervously on the sofa armrest. How's Julia? Dad, I sternly said, what is this all about? Okay, I thought you and Mom liked Julia. Look, if you have a problem with the two of us having a kid, then you just have to get used to it, because I don't intend to. This has nothing to do with her, Kevin. He interrupted me calmly. I called you here because I want to tell you a story. He scratched his chin, looking nowhere in particular. It looked like he was trying to remember something. He couldn't possibly tell what kind of point his story would have or what importance it held that he had to schedule a private meeting for the two of us, but I decided to save my comments until he said his part. Well, he awkwardly looked at me and then down at the coffee table. It all started a long time ago. He took a sip from his water, his hands trembling again, and I wasn't sure if it was from being nervous or from old age. It took everything within me not to ask him what started. He leaned back in his sofa and looked at me with a reinvigorated gaze before continuing. Your great-grandfather was only 23 years old back then. He was already dating his wife-to-be, and they were visiting the town's fair. It was a nice summer day, according to the story he told your grandfather. He was just done winning a prize for your great-grandmother in a shooting game. The two of them walked around looking for interesting places to stop at when they saw a peculiar-looking tent. There was a sign in front that said fortune-telling, and your great-grandmother was more than enthused by the idea of seeing what their future entailed. They entered the tent, which seemed to be ominously dark, despite the daylight that should have glared into the entrance. Inside was a gypsy lady, your typical stereotype, red bandana over the head, lots of jewelry, big round earrings, And she sat by a small round table, which had a crystal ball in the center. She pleasantly welcomed your great-grandparents and asked them if they were interested in knowing their own future for a mere nickel. Your great-grandfather decided to go first, thinking there was nothing to lose. He sat by the table. The gypsy lady immediately clasped her hands across the crystal ball, which suddenly seemed to emanate a bright light, which illuminated the fortune-teller's face, revealing all blemishes underneath it. She spoke vaguely of the futures to come, talking about a wedding between your great-grandparents and potential job opportunities, etc. All in all, she didn't give any mind-blowing insight about his future, and apparently, he didn't take that too well, accusing her of being a scammer. She proclaimed that she fairly told what she saw in the crystal ball and put her hand forward, demanding the nickel. But your great-grandfather refused, ready to leave the tent. The gypsy lady, she stared at him in silence, no visible emotion on her face, and suddenly, she calmly and quietly started to chant something in an unfamiliar tongue. She assumed was Romanian. He suddenly felt a shiver run down his spine. The air in the room changed drastically, becoming significantly colder than the summer day should have been. She proceeded to hum a certain melody, even going so far as to remove her bandana, cut a piece of her hair, and blow it towards your great-grandfather. More weirded out than scared, your great-grandfather left the place, tried to have more fun in the remaining time at the fair. Well, less than a year later, they got married, and your great-grandmother gave birth to your grandfather, Jacob. Jacob was a sickly boy of poor physical condition, unable to follow up with his peers. He was diagnosed with a rare disease at the age of 6. It was estimated by the doctors that he would not live past 12. Your great-grandfather was devastated, of course. By the time Jacob reached the age of 8, he got a younger sister. And as soon as she was born, Jacob miraculously recovered. The doctors couldn't explain it. They were baffled by his case, calling him a literal miracle. He lived a long life. He died peacefully. His sister, however, was not so lucky. He shifted in his seat uncomfortably, grimacing as he did so. Do you want to take a break? I asked him. I knew he had a really bad back from years of labor and couldn't sit for too long. As eager as I was to hear the rest of the story, I also didn't want him to go through a physical pain. No, I'm good. I have to finish telling you this. It's very important. He cleared his throat, looked back at me with concern before continuing. As I was saying, your grandpa, Jacob, he lived the rest of his life healthily. His sister's birth coincided with a miraculous recovery. However, she didn't live past the age of 21. Your grandpa had your uncle, Scott, when he was 28. His sister had returned to finally feeling better around that time, but it was too late by then. Her disease had progressed too far, and despite showing signs of recovery, she died less than a year later. Right from your birth, your Uncle Scott was sick, as his father before him, only suddenly recovering when I was born. I took over the curse for some time, while Scott grew up to be healthy. I don't remember this because I was still a toddler, but your grandpa swears there were strange occurrences in the house around that time. He said he'd put me in my cradle, only to find me in suspicious places like the top of the wardrobe, out in the hallway, despite the doors being closed and the knobs too high for me to reach. Sounds like there could have been a logical explanation. There were more strange things happening. For instance, he said once that he approached my bedroom, and as he did, he heard someone in there with me, whispering something that sounded like chanting in an unfamiliar language. Hadn't even hit him until he remembered the story of the gypsy lady that his father had told him about years prior to that. He said I giggled at it, and every time I do it louder, there was a soft shh coming from the room. He knew it wasn't your grandma, because she had left to visit her parents, but when he opened the door, he found no one inside, and I stood in my cradle, seemingly jerking my gaze away from whatever I was fixated on previously to look back at my dad. He said that he saw my eyes darting around the room, as if looking for something. It was around this time that your grandpa Jacob started to suspect that the gypsy that his father told him about may have been more serious in her curse than he had originally thought. He hired all sorts of priests, black magic experts, voodoo experts, and so on. None of them stayed in the house for too long. They never wanted to talk about what they saw, only saying that they can't help him. At this point, my dad stood up, and he went over to one of the drawers behind the sofa. He opened it, and he continued speaking as he rummaged through it. Other things that happened were with photos. He'd often take photos with me, and at first, everything seemed okay, but as he looked closer, there was something wrong with the pictures. He continued rummaging in silence, so I figured it was my time to interject. I said, "Come on, Dad, all of this superstition? Just a streak of bad luck, and the photos, they could have been smudges on them or something." He ignored my remark and continued looking through the drawer with loud shuffling noises. When he finally found what he was looking for, he closed the drawer and turned back around, holding a number of old photos in his hand. They trembled at the edges like leaves in a wind. He sat down and flipped through them. He picked out one of the photos and put it in his lap. "Maybe so," he said finally. "I'll let you decide for yourself." He leaned forward and neatly placed the other photos on the coffee table. He leaned back in his chair and silently gestured for me to look at them. I did as he asked, and observed the pictures closer. "What do you see?" he asked. The first picture at the front was black and white, of my dad as a baby sitting in a pajama, next to a set of toys in what looked like a living room, and smiling a toothless grin at the camera. I squinted, looking at the background of the picture. When I saw nothing, I tried to focus on the obvious. My dad's face and the toys around him. Nothing. I shook my head. "What about the next one?" he asked. I flipped the picture, placing it at the back, and the next picture was of my grandpa, cradling my dad as a baby in his arms in the bedroom. My dad seemed to be sleeping in the picture, while his mom looked down at him with a smile. "Anything?" he impatiently asked. I looked around, but found nothing suspicious. No, there was something. Some kind of shadow in the corner of the room, but it could have been anything. Although the shape of the shadow looked almost human, stretched thinly around the corners of the wall and the floor. It's hard to tell due to the lack of color in the photo. Well, there's something here, but I mean, that could be anything, really. "Look at the next one," my dad said sternly. I flipped and stared at the next picture. It was of my dad as a toddler. He was seated at a table with a big birthday cake in front of him. He looked shriveled and sick, but despite that, he was staring at the camera as photogenically as in the first photo. A big, goofy smile. I immediately focused on the background of the picture instead of the things in the center, and sure enough, I saw something. A tall, thin shadow loomed in the background, ominously, maybe 2 steps behind my dad. I couldn't discern any other prominent features, save for the fact that the shape of it looked undoubtedly humanoid, despite the thin look. I couldn't tell for sure, but it looked like the shadow was facing my dad while he unsuspectingly smiled at the camera. Although I wasn't 100% convinced that this was some paranormal occurrence, it sent a shiver running down my spine. I placed the picture at the back and looked at the next one. It was one of my grandpa, my dad, when he was around 5, sitting by a table drawing something with crayons. My dad was smiling at the camera despite looking sicker and paler than before, while my grandpa curiously pointed at something on his drawing. And clear as day, standing right over their shoulder was the same thin shadow from before. It seemed to be hunched over and holding my dad gently by his shoulder, just enough to see its sharp fingertips overlapping with my dad's clothes, enough for me to be convinced this was no faulty camera. Looking up towards where the shadow's face should have been, I also saw what looked like a pair of eyes. Like 2 tiny clouds of smoke, devoid of any features that human eyes normally had. I hastily placed the picture at the back and looked at the next one. My dad was in the next picture as well, in his teen years, and he looked just as sick as before, sitting up in his bed. Despite that, a smile was strewn across his face as he looked at the camera. A big portion of the picture was black, taken over by that same shadow from the previous photos. It had its thin arms over my dad's shoulders and was looking directly at the camera this time. I saw its cloudy eyes more clearly now, gray and penetrating with malice, but a little lower. There was a thinly curved slit. It looked like the shadow was smiling. I suddenly became aware of how fast my heart was beating, so much that I could feel it thumping upon my chest. I quickly placed the picture at the back and looked at the only remaining one. I braced myself to see something even more horrifying here, but that never came. I stared at the photo of my dad, still in his teen years, holding a baby. Next to him was Uncle Scott. They both faced the camera with eager smiles, while the baby in my dad's arms slept. I squinted, I darted my eyes around the corner of the picture, and then I saw it. The shadow. All the way in the back, barely visible. 2 cloudy dots as eyes, and they were unmistakably staring in the direction of the baby. Well, my dad asked finally, staring at me unblinking with wide eyes. What is it? I asked, with a quivering voice. As soon as Scott had his daughter, I got better, he said. His daughter died very early on, though, and there was no more strange occurrences, at least not for a while. We had started to hope that the curse was over, and then you were born. I opened my mouth to say something, but I didn't know what to say. I placed the photos awkwardly back on the coffee table and spoke up. I was never sick. My dad stared down at the coffee table, and I could see tears well up in his eyes. You didn't even try to hide it, he said. No, you weren't. But your brother was. I widened my eyes, trying to speak, but only an inaudible gasp left my mouth. I leaned forward and said, Dad, what brother? My dad sniffled, his eyes now red, as he handed me the final photo with a trembling hand. I grabbed it feverishly, glancing at it. There were 2 newborn babies on it in a hospital nursery. They were seemingly sleeping peacefully in cribs side by side. I had to know, my dad said, sobbing. I just had to. As soon as you and your twin brother were delivered, I had to take a picture to see if the shadow would be back, and my suspicions were confirmed. When I took that picture, I glanced at the photo again, looking towards the corner of the room. There it was. Despite light illuminating the entire room, the shadow stood in the corner, its malicious gaze focused on one of the babies in the cribs. Dad? I looked up at him, tears welling up in my own eyes. Your brother was born 12 minutes after you. You grew up to be healthy, but your brother died less than a year later. He buried his face in his hands and wept violently for a while, and all I could do was stare at the picture, at the insidious shadow that had taken my brother away from me. without me ever getting to know him. My dad regained his composure and finally spoke up again. I tried to stop it. I talked with all sorts of experts, but when everything rational failed, I found one gypsy fortune teller to help me. I was desperate. I told her I'd pay her as much as she wanted as long as she took off the curse. She confirmed that this was some sort of black magic, that whatever that shadow is, it was summoned from another world by the fortune teller that your great-grandfather refused to pay. So she managed to break the curse. It's not that simple. Black magic can't be dispelled by anyone but the person who placed the spell. And the gypsy fortune teller that cursed our family has been dead long since. The shadow always seemed to latch onto the youngest one in our family, and the only way it ever leaves them alone is by latching onto a newborn. However, if the family member it latches onto dies, the evil spirit goes dormant for a while. Your Uncle Scott's daughter died. Everything was fine for years, and then your mom and I had twins. And it came back. After you finished off your poor brother, everything went back to normal. It's dormant right now, but once you have a child, it'll come back. And every generation, it gets stronger. He sniffled, wiped his tears, as I continued staring at the picture of myself and my brother in the nursery. So how do we stop it? I asked. He shook his head. You can't. The gypsy woman that I talked to said that this spirit will never leave. Till the last member of our family dies. That's the only way to banish it back to wherever it came from. He exhaled deeply and was calm again as he continued. Whether you want to have a child is your own choice, but if you do, you have to know that you're putting it in danger. Your Uncle Scott had no other children, so you're the last surviving descendant of our family. The spirit will latch onto your child without doubt. I didn't say anything. A moment later, my phone vibrated, and when I looked at it, I saw a message from Julia asking me where I was. Dad, I'm gonna go now. I have things to take care of, I said. Yeah, I understand. He stood up. I know this is a lot to take in, but I want you to think about everything that I told you today. I know you're not superstitious, but I implore you to think about it. I nodded and I left. I thought about it. The whole time on my drive back home. I mean, could there really be some malevolent spirit haunting our family whose only purpose was to feed off this newborn? It sounded ridiculous. Couldn't possibly be true. I dismissed it. Decided to have a relaxing dinner with Julia. I couldn't get rid of the nagging feeling though, so I took out my phone. I told Julia to smile. Hey, stop it, she said, smiling at the camera. My flash temporarily blinded her, and I apologized. I entered my phone's gallery and I looked at the picture I took. But I didn't focus on Julia. How do I look? She asked. I zoomed in the corner behind her. It may have been my imagination. But behind Julia, in the corner of the room, right next to the curtains, looked like there was a very thin, very tall shadow stretching across the wall, with two tiny, cloudy dots for what looked like eyes, and they were staring directly at her. I lived in the Vista Green apartments for about 4 years now without much complaint, and I pay my bills on time. I always make sure that rent is a week ahead, and that if I have any maintenance problems, I call the super that same day. I guess you could say that I fell into a routine. Everything became automatic. Grab the mail, punch the security code, nod politely to neighbors. You just let one thing blend into another before you know it. Weeks pass by, and months, and the years. Everything blurs together. I guess that's why when something out of the ordinary occurs, it's so jarring. It's like when you're driving along and suddenly you wind up in a traffic jam. If you aren't careful, a situation like that can become a 10-car pileup. But this is what happened to me just a few weeks ago. Recently, management made it clear that there were going to be several renovations made to the building. At first, I didn't think it would affect me, but as I learned rather quickly, they wanted to start to work at the top and go down from there. Now, where am I supposed to stay as this is going on? I remember asking the workers as they started moving my furniture around. It felt like my home was being invaded. It'll take 12 hours, maybe 18. We'll be out of here so fast you won't even know that we were here, the head maintenance guy told me. So I called my girl Lisa, asked if she wanted to go spend the day shopping. It was pointless to stand around and get an anxiety attack when I couldn't do anything to stop them. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Lisa told me once we were away from the apartment. They stripped down my floors and installed new lighting for me about a year back and didn't charge me a dime. It's one of the perks of living here, she explained. Couldn't argue with that. So I resolved to push it out of my mind for the rest of the day. And it worked. By the time I was telling Lisa goodnight and getting into the elevator, I had completely forgotten about the maintenance men. That changed when I stepped out of my floor and I saw something leaking out from underneath my apartment door. It looked like smoke, like low, rolling clouds of gray smoke that were pushing out of the penthouse. Immediately, I ran and unlocked the door, thinking my entire place had somehow burst into flames. I used my scarf to cover my mouth and then gently pushed the door open. Instead, as I entered, I found that the same strange gray smoke was wafting about on the floor of the den in the first hall. Nothing had been disturbed until I reached the kitchen. That was where I found the first body. One of the maintenance men was lying against the cold tile floor, either passed out or worse. Another was right across from him, keeping my mouth covered. I went back to the hall and I cranked up the AC, hoping to get the smoke to escape my apartment via the vents. As it cleared, another mystery unfolded. Between the bodies of the two workers, I saw what appeared to be a trap door, hidden beneath the tile. From the tools that were lying near, it was also clear that these men had been working to pry apart the tile and get to the door. The door itself looked old, like the kind you might find as a tornado shelter. And then I noticed that they had in fact succeeded in shimmying it open, because that was where the strange gray smoke was coming from. Slowly I opened the trapdoor all the way, trying to get a good look at what might lie below. But instead all I saw was a ladder, plummeted into the darkness. Aside from the ladder, the only thing visible in the tunnel was the smoke. It kept rolling out over the top of the still bodies of the men, and watching it slither about my apartment made me more nervous than I already was. My first idea was to call the super, but then I remembered how late it was, but she'd already gone to bed for the night. My second idea wasn't much smarter either. I figured if anyone had an idea of what to do, it'd be Lisa. This stuff is giving me a headache, she moaned as she checked out the rest of the apartment first and then focused on the two dead men in my kitchen. Jesus Christ, Chris. Why haven't you called the police yet? I asked. I don't know. I didn't know what to do, I admitted as she leaned down to examine the trapdoor. The hell does this lead? She asked, looking down the hall. I stood alongside her, nervously biting my lip and wondering the same thing. There's no way this goes to the floor below. There's probably only like 15 feet between us, Lisa said as she took off her heels and started to get in the hole. Wait, what are you doing? I asked. There's only one way to get to the bottom of this, she quipped. I watched as she descended into the darkness until she was gone from sight. Then I waited. Felt like forever. And finally I got nervous and I called down to her. Lisa? Lisa, can you hear me? What did you find? I asked. The worst response I got was none at all. The tunnel was quiet. I tried to shine a light down there, too, to see how far it went, but the illumination didn't travel very far. And then, just as I was trying to figure out what to do next, my foot touched one of the maintenance men's shoulders, and suddenly his body disintegrated like dust. I stifled a scream as I watched it collapse into itself the way a sandcastle would, and then I turned to the other man and wondered if the same would happen to him if I bumped him. I gently reached towards his arm and gave it a squeeze. Then his skin faded into ash as well. I stood there confused, scared for the longest time, trying to figure out what had just happened. And then I watched in stunned silence as the fog that I had seen from earlier slowly covered the remnants of their body, as if it was swallowing up the particles that was left. Then it seemed to slither back into the hole where it had come from. In a matter of minutes, my apartment was clear of the gray smoke, and I was standing alone, staring down at the pit. Probably stood there for the longest time, looking down at the tunnel, hoping that Lisa would come back, but eventually I convinced myself to close the door and cover up the hole. I checked into a hotel for the night. I got as drunk as possible, trying to forget about the hole and the mystery fog. And the next day I went to the super to explain what had happened to his two maintenance guys, but he acted like I was the crazy one. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I asked angrily. And then to my surprise, behind me, the two men I had seen turn into ash stepped into the office and nodded politely towards me. I felt this odd coldness about them when they were talking to me. "They had to start the renovations next week, but something came up. You needn't worry about us bothering you anymore," one of the men said. Felt like my eyes were playing tricks on me, but I didn't want to look like a crazy person, so I thanked them for their time, and I left. I was crossing the lobby. Another familiar face stopped me dead in my tracks. "Lisa! Oh, thank goodness you're all right," I said as I ran up to give her a hug. But if the maintenance man had acted cold, and the way that she treated me was like hell had frozen over. "Chris, everything okay?" she asked with a sneer as she stepped away from me. My mouth felt dry. It was some kind of prank? I mean, what do you mean, am I okay? Are you okay? You were in my apartment yesterday. You went into that strange tunnel. I mean, don't you remember? I asked anxiously. She responded by stepping onto the elevator and shaking her head as if I was babbling nonsense. "You must have had one too many last night. I think I would remember something like that." She chuckled. I was speechless. Until I made it into my apartment, and the confusion got worse when I checked my kitchen and I found no indication that the maintenance workers had ever disturbed the room at all. I mean, had it all been in my head? I tried my best to stop thinking about it, but this time I couldn't simply shrug it off. I found the few tools that I had in my emergency kit, and I went to the kitchen to see for myself. Gradually, I pried the tiles up, trying to see what was underneath. It didn't take long. It was just solid. There's no tunnel, no trap door. Maybe it had all been a dream. But for some reason, I felt the need to dig deeper. I pushed down against the floor and I brushed off what I thought would be dirt to see the outline of the door. And my heart skipped. Then, with renewed vigor, I pushed on through until I could easily open it again. Just like before, the ladder sank into the darkness. I called Lisa immediately, desperate for some kind of sane explanation. She rushed to my apartment and examined the tunnel, a perplexed look on her face. "Now this is quite strange, Chris, but I don't see the big deal," she commented as she walked around the other side. "Have you gone down there to check it out?" You went down yesterday. You don't remember a thing," I sputtered. "I'm fine. You should be fine too. We could go down together if you want," she replied. Something in her tone sounded wrong. Not like the Lisa I knew. It made my skin tingle, and I stepped away from her. Or I had the wind knocked out of me. I was frightened. I was confused. She grabbed at my hair and tried to drag me towards the pit. "Lisa, what's gotten into you?" I screamed as I pushed my fingers into her face and tried to break free. Lisa, or whatever was now controlling her body, hissed at me like a poisonous cobra. She snagged her nails into me and slammed my head against the tile. I switched to survival mode, and I fought back as hard as I could to overcome her, pushing her towards the pit. I knew from her feral spirit that it was going to be either me or her, and with all my strength I pushed her straight to the edge of the pit. She lost her footing and fell straight into the hole. Lisa screamed, and I watched as she plummeted, her voice echoing for nearly 10 minutes until it was just a distant blur. I remember thinking I just killed my best friend. I fell to my knees. Broken and defeated. Took all I could to remember that this thing couldn't have been Lisa. Whatever was in this tunnel had changed her. What was down there? I had to know. Something inside me stirred me to know, but this time, it would need to be me that went down there to find the answers. I'm going down now. I'll update when I get back. Maybe I'll take a few pictures of what I found along the way. Wish me luck. Update. I was mistaken. There's nothing here. There never was. I know you probably don't believe that, given everything I've said prior to this, but it's the truth. You don't believe me? I mean, you can always just come see for yourself. I think I need to move again. The doctors called it agoraphobia. I call it a rational reaction after being stalked for 2 years by an ex. The moment that he was finally jailed, I picked up everything and I got out of there. Mom said I could move in with her, but I didn't want her to see what I'd become. The new apartment was across the street, cheap, had plenty of delivery services. Once I entered that building, I resolved the closest I'd get to leaving it was to get the mail every other day. I work from home, freelance writing, unpredictable at best, but I'd managed to get it to work for me. The place was actually really nice at first glance. No cracks, no drafts. The stove worked like a charm, the fridge was cold, heck, even the light bulbs didn't need changing. The building occasionally settled loudly, but it wasn't too loud. Maintenance made sure this place was nice. Neighbors weren't too far off either, although I had only talked to one of them, an old lady who had lived there since the place was built. A widow had a fat, ugly cat, and she brought me chocolate chip cookies that tasted even better than my mom's shortly after I moved in. I never invited her in. She was kind. She even brought me my mail sometimes. I figured this place was the perfect place for the new start that I wanted. At first, I blamed it on the open window during a rainstorm. See, I'd come into the room and found the wall next to my bed dripping water. I hadn't remembered leaving the window open, but I was pretty scatterbrained once I got relaxed in this place. I just closed the window, wiped down the walls, resolved to be more careful. Then I noticed the walls dripped a lot. Not like a leak from the apartment above. It was like condensation on a bottle. The walls would just grow little beads of water and drip. I complained to the landlord, but unsurprisingly, he told me the building just did that sometimes. Ass. Around the 5th time this happened, some of the water got in my mouth. I was just wiping down the wall. It had gotten exceptionally wet this time, and some just flicked into my mouth. It tasted like sweat. It tasted exactly like sweat. Disgusting, but I rationalized this wasn't too strange. Maybe it was the paint that gave the condensation the salty taste. Nothing too strange. It just had a wall that sweated. And then came the day I hit my head. I had tripped on a rug and knocked myself across the forehead on the cupboard. I fetched an ice pack from the freezer and stumbled into my room, deciding to screw the rest of the workday and just lie down. I just flopped down and the ice pack slipped from my fingers, landing against the dripping wall. And the building sighed. But it was a genuine sigh of relief, like when you stumble from a hot outdoors into a cold air conditioning of a home. I yelped and I snatched away the ice pack, wondering if I had given myself a concussion. The wall was silent. Slowly, I slid the ice pack across the bed and pressed it against the wall. The wall moved. Slouched, more like it. Relaxed, with the ice pack pressed against it. I was shaking. I wanted to scream and cry. Instead, I just lied down and I pretended that I was dreaming. The next morning, I did a first. I left my apartment and went to the old woman's room. Her ugly cat insisted on snuggling with me, and the old lady got me milk and cookies. And after the typical small talk, how work was going, the weather, how her health was, I finally decided to bring it up. So last night I had some kind of weird thing happen here. Have the walls ever sighed? Like made a sound like sighing, at least. I felt like an idiot. The woman's milky eyes looked up in surprise before she smiled wide. So you noticed it too? It's been a long time since someone put it together. So long, honey, so long. I blinked owlishly. Ma'am, I'm not sure what you mean. The cat jumped off my lap and ran into the bedroom. The woman watched him go and sighed, eerily sounding like my bedroom wall. This place is special, dearie. The original landlord made a deal with the devil, you see. A deal with the devil? Maybe it wasn't the wisest idea to come to a person who likely had dementia and didn't know me from her grandchildren. She bobbed her head up and down, quite pleased. Yes, to get the money to build this place, but it's not a bad thing. This place only has a deal with the landlord. He refuses to step foot into this place. Try and call him, you'll see. But this place has quite a few perks. I suppose just treat this place with kindness. It'll pay that back. Your neighbors on the right, they always keep the heat so high. Makes the building uncomfortable. I swear on my father's grave, they're gonna pay for that soon. I left back to my room feeling distinctively uncomfortable. I had to know the truth, though. I started a routine where every night I'd get frozen water bottles out of the fridge and the ice packs and start pressing them against the wall. Now, it certainly helped the walls sweating, although the sighs were still unsettling, but sure enough, the building started to pay me back. I'd find out that the oven was preheating when I wanted to make dinner. I'd find coupons in my mailbox. The carpet was always clean. Little things like that. I even left the room once to get another water bottle, and I came back to find that my laptop booted up and was plugged in, my writing program up and ready to go. The building did take care of me. In more ways than one. My mom called me the moment that my ex was released from prison. Apparently good behavior while locked up was good enough to let him go free with community service. I ran to the bathroom and immediately threw up. When I was done coughing up stomach acid, I looked up into the corner to find an antacid tablet and a cold washcloth. Thank you, I croaked, taking the washcloth and draping it around my neck, throwing the pills down my throat to calm my sick tummy. I really hope this isn't too much to ask, but I'm scared. I'm so scared that he's gonna come find me. The building made a groan, but this groan was sad. Like the place actually pitied me. I felt crazy, but I kept babbling. Just don't let him in the building, please. I know the doors are locked, but please make sure he stays away. I heard the click of my deadbolt and the sliding of the chain on the door. And then the poof of the oven turning on and something falling out of the fridge. I walked out to see a pack of cookie dough that my elderly neighbor had given me sitting on the floor. I made myself some cookies, curled up on the couch in a blanket to watch television. I didn't have a subscription, but apparently the building didn't care. It let me watch trash TV all night. Fell asleep. Felt perfectly safe. Exactly 1 week later, my ex found me. I heard singing outside my window, and my heart stopped. I glanced outside to see him walking down the parking lot, looking right at my window. How did he know? How did he know? The window slammed shut, and the building growled like a mad dog. I could still hear him yell, though. Get on good behavior. I'm a whole new man. Let me in. We could talk. I promise. I can make your life so much better. Again, the building growled. And then I heard it speak. I heard it speak clear as day. Get into bed. I'll take care of him. Didn't need to tell me twice. Hiding under the quilts felt childish but good. He wouldn't get in. I heard the smashing of the glass door that was closest to my room, and then I heard him scream and scream and scream. The next morning, the cops knocked on my door. Apparently, my ex was drunk. After breaking the glass, he fell forward and his throat was cut open by the shards still sticking out of the door. I could smell the blood in the air. I told him I was in bed, asleep with the help of medication. I didn't even hear him. Thanking me for my help, they left. I sat in my living room, sipping the cup of tea that had been left for me on the counter. My stalker was dead. had taken care of the building, and the building had taken care of me. And now you're probably wondering why I'm thinking about leaving. Well, last night the building started to growl again. And the neighbors who always had the heat turned too high, they started screaming. I'm still thinking about it, but I think it might be irritating to wake up to screams every time someone doesn't respect the building. Might be worth waiting it out, though. They just need to learn. Hey there, kids, it's me, Mr. Creepypasta, and thank you so much for listening to the Mr. Creepypasta Storytime podcast, found on Spotify or anywhere else where you guys happen to find podcasts. Or if you didn't find me there, then thank you for watching on YouTube and subscribing to the YouTube channel, Mr. Creepypasta. Or if you haven't found me there, then I have literally no idea how you could have found me. And now, for patreon.com/MrCreepypasta, which you can always find in a link in the description, I want to give you all a very big thanks. There's many of you down there in the descriptions who I give big thanks to, and everybody also at this tier, like Dr. Strawberry, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Ken, Lando Higuchi, Brianna Van Tine-Janzen, Chompski, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Sindee Barney, G Weevil 3, Diana Kraus, VanHuss, Tristain Pelton, Nico, kaeo, TheGingerBroz, Dante Rowe, Raphael Rodriguez, Lastbladesong, Meulmeester, Eliminator 86, Nebsky, SteampunkSinner, OptimisticAvacado, Kaleb Dougal, Daniel Poulsen, Finley, and Sky Harbor. You guys are the MVPs, and you guys keep the channel running, and I honestly cannot thank you enough for all that you do. That's all for tonight, guys. Sweet dreams.